It is exactly 2 in the morning deep in the heavily wooded training areas of Quantico, Virginia, and the L4 and L5 vertebrae in your lower spine are experiencing catastrophic mechanical compression. You are carrying 105 pounds of combat equipment, weapons, and water, and you have been moving continuously through the dark for 7 hours without a single moment of rest. Every time your boot strikes the uneven ground, a kinetic shockwave travels up your tibia, forcefully grinding the cartilage in your knee joints against the massive external weight of your rucksack. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. We cover the stories the history books skip. You don't want to miss what's coming next. I served nearly 20 years in the special operations community. I am not going to name names or list specific operations. A lot of that is in the past and some of it stays there. I came back with this body, some titanium hardware in my spine, and a military disability rating. Now this channel is my job. I share the reality of what it takes to survive in the worst conditions on Earth. I share what I know, you watch. That is the exchange. Today, we are actively deconstructing the physiological and economic reality of the United States Marine Corps Infantry Officer Course, commonly known as IOC. The civilian public often confuses this school with basic officer training, assuming it is simply an extension of the screaming drill instructors seen at boot camp. The Department of Defense views IOC as an incredibly expensive, mathematically brutal industrial filter designed to evaluate a human body's mechanical tolerance to absolute physical destruction. The course does not exist to teach basic leadership. It exists exclusively to determine if a newly commissioned second lieutenant can mathematically survive the biomechanical realities of modern infantry combat. Before a Marine officer ever arrives at the infantry officer course, they have already survived the grueling 10-week officer candidate school and the comprehensive 6-month curriculum of the basic school. The military has already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to commission these officers and teach them the foundational principles of land navigation, military law, and basic rifle platoon tactics. However, the Marine Corps actively separates the infantry from all other occupational specialties. An officer assigned to logistics, aviation, or administration proceeds directly to their specialized training pipeline after the basic school. The men and women selected to lead Marine infantrymen are diverted to the infantry officer course for an additional 13 weeks of sustained physical trauma. The initial filtering mechanism of this 13-week pipeline is the legendary Combat Endurance Assessment, a continuous undefined physical crucible that historically begins on the very first day. The candidate is abruptly awakened in the middle of the night, ordered to completely pack their heavy combat rucksack and march directly into the dense Virginia woods. They are deliberately not informed about the total distance, the time standard, or the exact sequence of events they are about to face. This weaponized ambiguity is a calculated psychological tool designed to spike the candidate's cortisol levels and force their brain to process severe anxiety while under extreme physical load. To understand the sheer biological devastation of the Combat Endurance Assessment, you must first calculate the exact kinetic load the military forces these candidates to carry. A standard combat load begins with the plate carrier system, equipped with front, back, and side enhanced small arms protective insert plates, which mathematically add over 30 pounds of dead weight to the torso. The candidate wears a Kevlar combat helmet weighing roughly 3.5 pounds and carries a fully loaded M4 carbine weighing nearly 8 pounds. Inside their modular rucksack, they are required to carry heavy radios, extra lithium batteries, linked machine gun ammunition, and up to 20 pounds of water to prevent immediate heat casualties. The total physical load consistently exceeds 100 pounds and frequently reaches 120 pounds when candidates are forced to carry heavy squad weapons. The biomechanics of carrying this specific amount of weight are mathematically devastating to the human skeletal structure. When an individual walks without a load, their lower extremities absorb a ground reaction force equal to roughly 1 to 1.5 times their total body weight. When you add a 100-pound rucksack, The kinetic force driven directly into the patellofemoral joint of the knee spikes to nearly 3 or 4 times the body weight with every single step. The human spine is not evolutionarily designed to act as a primary load-bearing column for 100 pounds of external mass. The spine consists of stacked vertebrae separated by intervertebral discs, which function as biological shock absorbers filled with a gel-like substance called the nucleus pulposus. Under the continuous crushing vertical pressure of a heavy combat rucksack, these intervertebral discs begin to physically compress, forcefully squeezing the fluid out of the spinal column. Medical data demonstrates that after a 15-mile forced march under this specific load, a candidate can temporarily lose up to a full inch of physical height due to extreme spinal compression. As the fluids are driven out of the discs, the outer ring of cartilage, known as the annulus fibrosus, begins to suffer from severe microscopic tearing. This microtrauma causes severe, radiating lower back pain that immediately alters the candidate's natural walking gait. To compensate for the agony in their lumbar spine, the candidate unconsciously leans forward, shifting the massive weight directly onto their hips and the small, stabilizing muscles of their lower back. This biomechanical compensation rapidly accelerates muscle fatigue, completely flooding the lower back with lactic acid and causing agonizing, paralyzing muscle spasms. The physical destruction of the lower extremities during the combat endurance assessment is equally catastrophic. The heavy combat boots and the massive downward pressure force the bones of the foot to repeatedly expand and flatten against the hard ground. The plantar fascia, the thick band of tissue running across the bottom of the foot, stretches beyond its maximum tensile capacity, causing severe inflammation and micro-tearing. Simultaneously, the constant kinetic impact against the rigid boot causes intense friction, resulting in massive, deep tissue blisters that frequently tear the top layers of skin completely off the heel. The instructors evaluating the combat endurance assessment are highly experienced combat veterans, typically captains and senior staff non-commissioned officers who have survived multiple combat deployments. They do not yell, and they do not offer any form of motivational encouragement. They simply walk alongside the struggling candidates in absolute silence, holding a clipboard and recording specific data points on the candidate's physical posture and cognitive decline. The instructors are explicitly looking for the exact moment the candidate's prefrontal cortex completely surrenders to the physical pain in their joints. Throughout the multi-hour assessment, the candidates are forced to stop and execute complex tactical decision games and physical challenges while their bodies are severely depleted of glucose. A candidate might be ordered to drop their pack, sprint up a steep hill, assemble an M240 Bravo medium machine gun in the dark, and recite a highly specific operations order from memory. The military intentionally forces the candidate to execute fine motor skills and complex memory retrieval when their heart rate is heavily elevated, and their brain is actively starved of oxygen. If a candidate drops a vital piece of the weapons system in the mud, or fails to remember the specific grid coordinates required for an artillery strike, the instructors document a severe cognitive failure. The documented attrition rate for the combat endurance assessment is historically brutal, frequently eliminating up to 20 or 30% of an entire class within the first 24 hours. Candidates who physically collapse, who fail the timed land navigation portions, or who simply refuse to put the heavy rucksack back on their bleeding shoulders are instantly dropped from the course. A significant portion of the failures are purely medical, driven by severe cases of rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdomyolysis occurs when the extreme physical exertion literally breaks down skeletal muscle tissue, flooding the bloodstream with a protein called myoglobin that violently clogs the renal tubules and causes acute kidney failure. The civilian public frequently questions why the Marine Corps intentionally inflicts this massive level of physical destruction on its own junior officers. The answer lies in the unforgiving economics of human combat leadership and the specific institutional philosophy of the Marine Infantry. The Marine Corps believes completely in the concept of the shared burden. An infantry officer cannot effectively command a squad of 19-year-old Marines to carry heavy mortar base plates into a firefight if the officer is incapable of carrying that exact same weight. Leadership under heavy kinetic load is fundamentally different from leadership in an administrative environment. When a platoon is heavily ambushed, the officer must physically sprint while carrying 100 pounds of gear, forcefully suppress their own biological panic, and issue clear tactical commands to direct the machine gun suppressive fire. If the officer is completely crushed by the physical weight of their own armor and equipment, they cannot mathematically process the battlefield geometry required to save their men. The combat endurance assessment ensures that the officer's physical capacity is vastly superior to the baseline requirement, allowing their brain to remain completely tactical while their body absorbs the physical trauma. The candidates who successfully navigate the physical devastation of the initial assessment are not granted any time to recover. They immediately transition into the remainder of the 13-week curriculum, where the physical load carriage becomes a continuous daily operational reality. The academic portion of the course requires candidates to memorize highly complex standard operating procedures for offensive operations, defensive operations, and urban combat. They must mathematically calculate the precise explosive yields required for urban breaching, and master the complex ballistic trajectories of various heavy weapons systems. During the weapons package phase, the candidates must physically demonstrate mastery over every single weapon system employed by a Marine rifle company. They must carry and fire the heavy M240 Bravo machine gun, the M252 81mm mortar system, and the shoulder-launched multi-purpose assault weapon. Carrying a heavy anti-armor missile tube through the dense, humid swamps of Quantico adds massive, awkward weight to an already failing skeletal structure. The candidates execute live-fire platoon attacks using live fragmentation grenades and heavy suppressing fire, requiring absolute mechanical perfection to prevent catastrophic friendly fire incidents. The Marine Corps tracks extensive longitudinal medical data regarding the physical toll of this specific training pipeline. The injury patterns are highly consistent, heavily dominated by severe stress fractures in the tibia and metatarsals, massive acromioclavicular joint separations in the shoulders, and herniated lumbar discs. The military essentially views these injuries as the necessary cost of doing business. The institutional calculation dictates that it is mathematically safer to break a lieutenant's spine in a controlled training environment in Virginia than to have that lieutenant physically collapse during a combat patrol in a hostile urban environment. In recent years, the integration of female officers into the infantry officer course has provided the military with a massive volume of new biomechanical data regarding load carriage. When the course was first opened to women, the immediate attrition rate was mathematically staggering, heavily driven by the sheer physics of carrying loads that exceeded the candidate's own body weight. Female candidates face severe biomechanical disadvantages regarding lower body mass, a wider pelvic structure known as the Q angle, and reduced upper body density required for the rope climbs and obstacle courses. The women who eventually graduated the course had to possess an absolute mathematically elite level of physical strength and cardiovascular endurance to offset these biological reality of the 100-pound load. The final operational phase of the infantry officer course requires the entire class to deploy to the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center at 29 Palms, California. This desert training environment removes the humidity of Virginia and replaces it with extreme, sustained heat and massive, unforgiving elevation changes. The candidates conduct a continuous multi-day live-fire exercise known as PALMFEX, executing complex company-level assaults across miles of open, rocky desert terrain. The temperature frequently exceeds 110 degrees, requiring the candidates to consume massive quantities of water simply to maintain basic biological functions. During these final desert operations, the sleep deprivation reaches its absolute peak. The candidates operate on a continuous cycle of planning, marching, assaulting, and securing the objective, frequently receiving less than 2 hours of interrupted sleep per night. The instructors introduce massive operational friction, deliberately altering the tactical scenario at the last possible second to evaluate the candidate's cognitive flexibility. The exhausted officer must rapidly recalculate their entire fire support plan, coordinate new medical evacuation routes, and execute the assault while their body is completely starved of basic caloric energy. When the final objective is secured and the live ammunition is expended, the surviving candidates are officially awarded the Military Occupational Specialty of 0302, Infantry Officer. They return to Quantico with bodies that are visibly emaciated, having lost massive amounts of muscle mass and structural bone density over the 13 weeks. They have paid the biological tax required to stand in front of a Marine rifle platoon. They have mathematically proven that gravity, exhaustion, and physical agony cannot override their cognitive duty to command. The institution of the United States Marine Corps operates on a highly specific, mathematically unyielding philosophy regarding combat leadership. The military does not care about a candidate's academic pedigree or their previous athletic achievements when the reality of combat requires hauling heavy ammunition across a hostile environment. The infantry officer course is explicitly designed to destroy the human chassis because combat is explicitly designed to destroy the human chassis. The Marine Corps requires leaders who can continue to output flawless tactical geometry long after their biological systems have completely failed. If this gave you a real picture of what it actually costs to lead Marine infantry, hit the like button. Drop a comment. Did you attend IOC or OCS? What was the moment the physical weight almost broke you? Share this with someone who thinks military leadership is just about giving orders from a desk. The 100-pound tax will end that conversation immediately.